There we go.
Welcome everyone to the first Know Before You Grow meeting of 2025. We're glad to have you here. We're hoping for this to be the best year yet for Urban Chat and Know Before You Grow. I normally introduce distinguished guests tonight. I see two council people now that I recheck the list and one planning commissioner. So
I see three.
Three council members.
okay. You're right. Frank, I'm not used to you being council yet. So council members, John Shribs, Janice Cater Thompson, and Frank Quitt, thank you for joining us. And Planning Commissioner Nicola Fry, same to you. Great to have you folks make time in your busy schedules.
And Kevin McDonald.
I haven't seen Kevin yet. Kevin?
Yeah,
Mayor Kevin?
Yeah, he's there.
Okay. Thanks for being here. Also, I want to mention that more than a lot of our forums, we were able to get some other nonprofits to publicize this event this evening. So thanks go to Cool Petaluma, Safe Streets Petaluma, and Generation Housing for helping us get folks out for this evening. I want to start by reminding everybody that the second annual Better Cities Film Festival, as hosted by Petaluma Urban Chat, will be 3 weeks from tonight. Posters became available today. Anybody who wants one, let me know. I will drop it off on your front door if you tell me you have a good place to hang it. We have 200 roughly tickets to sell, and we'd like to get all of those moved. It was a good event 2 years ago or a year and a half ago. We want to do the same this time. And just to give those of you who weren't with us at the last film festival a taste of what we talk about, what we present, we are going to show a short film from a group called First on Main. A little bit of history. First on Main came together perhaps 30 years ago, two young guys who wanted to make their life work doing films about small towns, doing creative, interesting things. They did it. They made a career. They finally said they had enough of a film library. They should be doing more with it. That's when they created Better Cities Film Festival, which is the library we use for our film festival. But First and Main continues to make interesting stuff. I've had a chance to meet both of these folks. I've done a webinar with them. So Dan, if you could just start that First and Main film, I'd appreciate it.
Come on.
I think we need sound.
Should be.
There it is.
Every city, every town has a story to tell, hiding right there in plain sight. Maybe it is touching, historic, or unshakably optimistic. Perhaps it is gritty and self-determined. We find those stories and we tell them for you in film. Whether it's for celebration, revitalization, or promotion. John Padgett began his career creating award-winning films on America's Main Street. Films that helped revive a string of small towns that had been nearly forgotten. He founded First and Main Films with his friend Chris Elisara, an advocate for places people love and the people and communities that build them and call them home. So what is First and Main? It's a street corner in nearly every American city. And it's a film company. We're proudly headquartered in the Rust Belt. But we really live at the intersection of storytelling and placemaking. And at the crossroads of ideas.
Okay, hang on a sec. People are not seeing this. Am I correct in that?
No, I'm seeing it.
Okay.
I see it, Dan. Yeah,
I
I'm seeing
see
as
it.
well.
We don't see it anymore.
Okay, well, let's continue then.
About cities and towns. Ideas about how to make them better. Ideas about how to share their stories. We've done this all over the world. And right here in our hometown of Buffalo. If there's one thing we've learned, if there's one thing we know, it's this. A story can change a city. It can change everything.
Thank you, Dan. I don't have a comprehensive list, but at least 3 of the films that are on this year's film festival had a short clip in that film. So that gives you a good sense of the kind of things you'll be seeing if you join us in 3 weeks, which is highly encouraged. Next, I'm going to go to a PowerPoint presentation, which I really didn't want to do. However, I never quite found the right video to explain the full extent of what parking reform means. So let me see, let's get going here. There we are, I think. And from beginning. And truly, I do not like being the one to talk in these things, but sometimes I just sort of need to do that. What is parking reform? And that's a really complicated question. The more I thought about it, there are so many different things that have been lumped under parking reform for good reason. But I think the best way to describe it is it's a movement to reduce parking dependence and autocentrism. Has a variety of tools that can be applied in many ways for many reasons. Why do we talk about parking reform? Very top of the list, reduce car dependency. Because it's more friendly for bicyclists and pedestrians. If there are fewer cars on the road, if they're driving slower, and then also climate action. The more we're out of our cars, and parking reform does connect to how many cars, how many trips get taken, whether it's people because parking is priced correctly, they choose to walk or ride bikes instead, or just because when they show up at a place, they can find a parking space right away rather than circling the block in frustration, creating hazards to people who are not in cars. So more friendly to bicyclists and pedestrians, it's climate action. Several major cities, Minneapolis is the one that's usually mentioned first, although I think Toronto also is high on that list, has found when you reduce parking minimums, when you don't make developers put as many spaces in, and there's some aspects of that we'll discuss in a minute or two, but when you change parking minimums, you get a lot more housing, and that housing is more affordable. One of the probably the single most important thing you can do, one of the top things, is changing parking rules if you want more housing. You create more public space, whether it's parklets or a large off-street parking lot that's no longer needed. You create places for people to be people rather than people being something riding around in cars. And improved business vitality. I know most every city assumes parking reform will hurt downtown businesses, and virtually every city who's ever done it has found the reverse to be true. You will hear stories about both Pasadena and Toronto just in passing tonight, who found how much more vitality happened when you have less parking or you manage parking more effectively. Now, what is parking reform? The many tools I mentioned earlier. It can be changed parking standards and zoning codes. If you reduce minimums, as I mentioned earlier, you can encourage housing. Sometimes those reduced minimums force you into parking management. You just can't let a developer put up a project with 15 homes and no parking when there's already no parking on the street. That doesn't work. But there are processes you can use to give stickers, and only people with stickers can park overnight. You'll hear a story from Japan later this evening that they don't let you buy a car in Japan unless you have a place to park it off street. Therefore, they do not allow any parking on street, at least at night, and in some cases, not at all. Reduce parking maximums. We know there's never a time of day anywhere in the year that we can't go to Target and find a parking place. We've driven by enough. We know that's the case. It's never full. Stores like having that. To me, that's cheap. To them, that's cheap advertising. They know, people know they can go there anytime and find a parking space. But it means that there is some valuable land that we have built infrastructure to serve that is sitting there basically empty. And the stores are arguing there's very little value to it because they're not generating any revenue off of it, so they shouldn't be paying property tax. That's just a ridiculous set of circumstances. Reduced maximums, part of parking reform, can address that. You can have location-specific parking standards. Near transit, that's something that the legislature has taken a key on. There are no parking minimums within a half mile of major transit stops. In Petaluma, the only places that qualify as major transit stops are the true smart stations, but that's a start. In walkable location and in 15-minute cities, you can have less parking because other options exist to get around. Shared parking. In a town I lived previously, I had the head of a CPA firm come to me and say, we have a problem. We don't have enough parking. I reviewed the situation. He was next door to a church that only used the parking lot on Sundays. He's a CPA firm. They don't have many clients on Sunday except during April. It was such an obvious match. The church wouldn't accept it. No, they did not want anybody else in their parking lot, period. But over time, those things have become more common. In the same town, not long after that, a movie theater and a deli went in next to each other, a deli that focused on breakfast and lunch service. This planning department agreed that that was a good shared parking use between a theater and a morning deli. Business owners agreed it was a good solution and it took up less land. Unbundled parking. This is something that 10 years ago, you really didn't hear about, and now it has become almost a standard part of Petaluma's approvals of multi-family housing. For those who aren't familiar with it, unbundled parking means when you rent an apartment, you don't get a parking space. If you want a parking space, you pay extra for that. What it means is that your 88-year-old grandmother who hasn't driven in 20 years and you don't want her behind a wheel isn't paying for a parking place because it's always included with her apartment. She can unbundle that. And when you unbundle parking and make people pay the true cost for the parking spaces they want to use, you'll find a lot of them say we don't really need that second car anymore. So unbundled parking, it's fairer, and it does reduce the number of cars on the street and the number of miles that are traveled. Lastly, maybe not lastly, but one I love, 10 years ago, I came across the term curb management, and it immediately made sense to me. And just in the last 2 weeks, I've heard somebody at City Hall use the term curb management. It's fun the way these ideas gradually percolate because they're right. Donald Shoup, who I'll introduce a little more later, has said that the most valuable locations in a city, the most valuable real estate a city owns for creating wealth is the face of the curb. Because what you do with that face of the curb is so crucially important to how economically vital your community can be. Just a short list here of possible uses that a curb could go to. A transit stop, that would be for fixed transit. A micro transit stop. Could Luma Go come onto Kentucky Street rather than dropping people off at Petaluma Market? An Uber and Lyft stop. Not always our favorite things in the community, but does it make sense to have Uber have a place to drop people off on Kentucky? Always a good example. A DoorDash stop. As we were getting ready to convene this evening, Dan Like was talking about watching the Priuses double park on B Street out in front of Wild Goat Bistro, picking up food to go, DoorDash, you know, and that double parking creates all sorts of other issues. DoorDash stops, Uber Eats, whatever, can be a good use. Parklets. I know parklets were controversial when they first went in. They've sort of become part of the background now. But if I had to guess, I'm going to say the Mi Pueblo parklet on Kentucky has probably added more to business than is taken away by the few parking spaces that it requires. Parklets can be a great alternative use of that curb space. Bike parking, hey, I'll leave that for Safe Streets Petaluma to make the argument, but I know bike parking brings more people downtown than cars do. Accessible parking, we certainly have people who do need that kind of access. Metered parking and free parking. I've differentiated those because metered parking can result in better retail. It causes a little quicker turnover. It makes it more comfortable coming downtown because you know a parking space is available if metered parking is done well. Whereas free parking, it is so easily abused and provides really no revenue to anybody, to the district, to the city, anything. In a lot of ways, you could argue that free parking is the single worst use you could make of a curb space, and it's the most common use we make of it. Doesn't speak well of our ability to make good decisions. Okay, I've now broached the topic of paid parking, and I know I'm expecting to have nasty words printed on my garage door tomorrow morning. But parking meters are what we're talking about here. I know there is huge pushback in Petaluma against parking meters. Most communities have that. This is where we begin the conversation. Dynamically priced meters. This is a Donald Shoup. I'm mentioning that man again. I will get back to him. Donald Shoup idea of 25 years ago that has now started taking off, that you only put meters on streets where you have extended periods of the day where at least 85% of the parking stalls are in use. If you never get to that level, there's no reason to put up a meter because there's no resource there to be managed. It's only when you have places that are overparked, people circling looking for parking, that meters become appropriate. And then you price the meters so that there's always a space available, on average, always a space available. The standard rule for most places is 85% parking usage. So let's say you put meters on Kentucky Street and you price them originally at $1 an hour and it stays completely full. You go to $1.50, you go to $2, finally at $2.50, people are willing to say, no, for $2.50, I'll go park in the Keller Street garage. And by doing that, they always leave a space available for somebody else to come in who's willing to pay the $2.50. It's a way of getting cars parked as quickly as possible, out of the street, safer for pedestrians, less pollution, all of that. Then if you have off-street parking, you need to have that price so it's an effective balance to on-street parking. So many places it's off-street parking costs you $15, street parking is free, and gee, why is everybody circling the block looking for a free parking space? Market, people make rational decisions sometimes, and parking is certainly one of them. So we need to get to a place where on-street parking and off-street parking are close enough that it's a balanced decision which way people want to go. And then lastly, on paid parking, and this is one of Shoup's key principles, three key principles. You can't put in parking meters to benefit City Hall. If you take parking meters from downtown Petaluma and use to pave a street a mile away, one, you're never going to make it happen because the merchants aren't going to buy into it. And two, it just doesn't create the downtown you really want. Where every place parking meters have worked well, or most every place, it started by going to the merchants going, we expect to make X dollars. How do you want us to spend them? Is it cleaning your sidewalks? Is it putting up flower baskets? What do you want to make your place better? The one I've pushed for nearly a decade now is I would like to see fixed route shuttle from the neighborhoods around Petaluma, probably closer to downtown, but fixed route shuttles that run downtown regularly. I don't necessarily want to drive downtown. I would be happy to wait 10 minutes for a shuttle to come by, hop on, ride downtown, and not have to worry about parking. I think if you do that, you may actually end up with more people downtown, more shoppers than you have now. So those are the key issues of metered parking. Again, this begins the conversation. It will continue. Getting toward the end of the list here, management of spaces and structured parking. What that really means, and I think you've all seen this, is when you pull up to a parking garage and there's a sign out front telling you there's 5 spaces on the first floor, there's 15 on the third, and so you know before you go in how far you're gonna have to go up to find a parking place, and you know there's a parking place available. There's a garage in Berkeley I would go to for basketball games occasionally, and it would tell me, you can't come in. There is no parking here. Compare that to the experience at, let's say, the Keller Street garage on Butter and Eggs Day. You could go in and circle all the way to the top of the Keller Street garage to realize there's no parking there, but you're now queued up behind 3 or 4 cars, hoping something opens up, and you're sitting there just wasting your time. If you put in the technology, put the sign out front to manage that space better, everyone feels better about using places like the Keller Street garage. And ultimately, and this is not something anybody's proposing now, but long-term, you really want to reduce the number of parking spaces available. I mean, if we think about what Petaluma in 2100 is going to look like, I hope all of us understand there'll be fewer parking places than there are today. One of the films we'll show tonight will talk about Amsterdam trying to remove 10,000 parking spaces. So we're not there in Petaluma. We may not be there in my lifetime, but it is the way of the future. Might as well start having the conversation. And I promise that is the end of my lecture. Dan, I think we are now queued up. Actually, yes, we are queued up for a film from Don Shoup. So let me just quickly introduce the man for those who maybe aren't familiar with him. I need to exit, don't I, Dan? Tell me how to do that.
Hang on.
I know.
I will do it for you.
You do it for me because I'm going to get it wrong.
Okay.
I'll distract myself. Donald Shoup, who you will hear him say this shortly also, retired professor of urban planning at UCLA. 25, 30 years ago, he decided to focus his career on parking, which at the time was sort of like, what are you doing? You're wasting your time. Nobody cares about parking. But he just said, no, we're doing this wrong. We're wasting money. We have better ways to handle parking. And he's now 86. A year ago, I spoke with him and he made a comment, he feels so blessed to have lived long enough that the ideas he put forth decades ago have now come into common circulation. Not everybody knows his name, but everybody is starting to bump against the ideas he put into circulation. This first video is him talking about, well, it's titled, Donald Shoup will find you a parking place. Dan, if you could start the video. Thanks.
And in an audience as large as yours, I suppose some of your viewers were even conceived in a parked car. I'm Donald Shoup. I'm a professor of urban planning at UCLA. Most of my research is on transportation and land use, and on parking as a link between the two. I'm out to save the world one parking space at a time. I think planning for parking in the United States has been a disaster. American drivers park free at the end of 99% of their vehicle trips. Just because the driver doesn't pay for parking doesn't mean the cost goes away. The cost is still there. It's not paid for by the driver, but you pay for parking in every other role you have in life, as a taxpayer, as a resident, either a tenant or a homeowner, when you go shopping, when you go to the movies. A little bit of every transaction has a small part shaved off to pay for your parking. One estimate of the total cost of the free parking in the United States is somewhere between what we pay for Medicare every year and national defense. I think I've been lucky in researching parking because it's escaped other people's interests, at least other academics' interests. They think it's either unimportant or trivial, but I think it is the single biggest land use in any city, and it it has a huge effect on the way we live our lives. Well, the average car is parked 95% of the time. So while other transportation columnists were chasing after the 5% of the time that cars were moving, I thought I could find out what was happening during the other 95% of their lives. And in an audience as large as yours, I suppose some of your viewers were even conceived in a parked car. I recommend 3 basic reforms. First is get the right price for curb parking. The second is to make this politically feasible by spending all of the meter revenue to add public services on the metered blocks so that people see they're getting something for their money. And the third is to reduce off-street parking requirements. What is the right price for curb parking? In order to make the system work well, you need about 1 vacant space on every block so that everybody driving around can see that there's a vacant space wherever they want to go. Nobody can say there's a shortage of parking because every block they go to, there are 1 or 2 vacant spaces. But the price has to be at the level that will create that vacancy rate. So the key aspect of pricing reform is to get the prices right. It'll be different at different times of day and on different days of the week, but it should always be the lowest price the city can charge and still have 1 or 2 vacant spaces on every block. Well, I think that minimum parking requirements have turned out to be a planning disaster, that now cities won't allow anything to be built unless it has ample free parking. That drives up the cost of all development just to reduce the price of parking. Somebody has to pay for that parking, and if the city won't allow these buildings to be built without the parking, the cities are really driving us into a future where almost everybody will drive everywhere they go and park free when they get there. Well, if curb parking is cheaper than off-street parking, we all have the incentive to hunt for a curb parking space. We drive around hoping to see a car leaving, but if you're hunting for parking, a lot of other people are too. We studied the effect of this in Westwood Village, a little shopping district next to UCLA, and cruised ourselves to find out how long it takes to find a space and how far you have to drive. It wasn't long, about 3 minutes, but if everybody does this, over the course of a year, all this cruising for underpriced curb parking in Westwood Village adds about 1 million vehicle miles a year. That's 4 trips to the moon, or 36 trips around the earth in a little 15-block shopping district. The cruisers don't pay much attention to bicyclists or pedestrians. Leads to accidents. People see an open space on the other side of the street, they'll make a U-turn in the middle of the block. It leads to dangerous behavior. And they're just doing what the city tells them to do, is to cruise for curb parking because it'll save you money. The city sets the prices, so they're inducing the behavior. And I think this is happening all over the earth. Old Pasadena is a great example of what I'm talking about in terms of parking policy. It's one of the most popular shopping destinations in Southern California now. 30,000 people on a weekend go to walk around. But 30 years ago, it was a skid row with mostly vacant stores. The city wanted to put in parking meters because all the curb spaces were taken up by the employees of the few shops who were there. The merchant said, no way, it'll chase away the few customers we have. They argued for a couple of years about this until the city said, all right, if we put in the meters, we'll return all the revenue for added public services in Pasadena. And like that, the merchant said, that's different. You didn't tell me that. Let's run the meters to midnight. Let's run them on Sunday. Let's charge a high price. So it was the revenue return that transformed the attitude towards paying for parking, or at least towards charging for parking. And the meter money is now over $1 million a year for a 15-block business district, about the same as Westwood Village. And they replaced all the sidewalks, they cleaned up all the alleys, they put all the wires underground, they steam clean the sidewalks twice a month, they sweep the sidewalks every night, they remove graffiti every night, and it's all paid for by meter money. Old Pasadena pulled itself up by its parking meters. Once the city began providing all these enhanced public services, all the property owners began restoring their buildings. And it's a wonderful place to go now, made possible mainly, not totally, but mainly by the revenue from the parking meters. And I think this could happen in many downtown areas of many cities.
After I had this program mostly put together, I was still, I like the Pasadena example, but I just thought we needed maybe a little more, something close to home, something with a few more details. And I couldn't find it. The best thing I could do was to email Donald Shoup. Yeah, he and I got to know each other at a conference a couple of years ago. We stay in touch once in a while. I emailed him yesterday afternoon asking for a recommendation on a video. Shortly after midnight last night, he emailed me a link that met my need. We're going to watch it now.
Finding a parking space can be frustrating and time-consuming. It's estimated close to a third of city traffic is caused by drivers circling while looking for a space. Some drivers just give up and double park. This clogs our streets and needlessly pollutes the air. These cars slow down public transit and get in the way of emergency vehicles. And drivers focused on finding parking create a hazard for pedestrians and cyclists. There is a better way. San Francisco is testing new parking technology and a flexible approach to pricing that is designed to make parking work better for everyone. SF Park's goal is to have at least one parking space available per block. That way, drivers can park near a specific destination without the need to circle the block or double park. This also provides a steadier flow of customers for business owners. SF Park provides safer and clearer streets for everyone. Here's how it works. Newly installed parking sensors detect when a parking space is available. Drivers will be able to check parking availability and rates online, by text message, and by smartphone before heading to their destination. This will help people decide whether to drive, take public transit, bike, or walk. When people choose to drive, new SF Park meters will make paying easier. In addition to taking coins, the new meters will accept credit cards and SFMTA parking cards. Parking time limits will be extended. Easier payment and extended time limits will help drivers avoid tickets. Prices at city-owned parking garages will be adjusted to provide an attractive alternative to meter parking. Parking rates will be adjusted based on demand, once a month, never by more than 50 cents. So, in areas where it seems nearly impossible to find a parking space, rates will increase until at least one space is available most of the time. And in areas where open parking spaces are plentiful, rates will decrease until most of the empty spaces fill, or until rates bottom out at as little as 25 cents per hour. SF Park is designed to ensure that drivers easily find an open space near their destination. SF Park will help people plan ahead, making informed decisions about the best time and the best way to visit busy areas. SF Park begins its federally funded pilot project in 8 areas across San Francisco, starting in the summer of 2010. Use sfpark.org to learn more. Sign up for project alerts and to let us know what you think. Circle less. Live more.
If you're wondering how the trial worked out, it worked out really quite well, except that drivers were unhappy that the price of parking might change month to month because the city was finding places where either too much or too little of the parking was being used. And because of that, because drivers were unhappy, the program wasn't completely obliterated, but it was reduced from its peak efficiency. Drivers sort of tend to have that ability to get political decisions that don't necessarily align with good sense. The last video I want to show before we start talking about how we want to present some of these arguments to the council next Monday is one from a group called Not Just Bikes. Probably many of you have come across their videos. They are really quite well done. It's worth looking for the entire series. This one is about removal of parking. And as I said earlier, I don't expect we're anywhere close to removing parking in Petaluma, although it should be a long-range goal. This is something in Amsterdam where a political party came to power with the promise to remove 10,000 parking spaces. And I think there's some lessons here that off in the future perhaps, but there's still things we can be aware of. Dan, if you can start that, and remember to cut it off at about 8:30. 8:30, 8 minutes
When
and
we
30
moved
seconds.
to Amsterdam in 2018, the municipal elections had just finished. One of the political parties is GroenLinks, basically the local Green Party. As part of their election platform, they promised to remove 10,000 parking spaces from the streets of Amsterdam by 2025. But, of course, when the election was held, they won a landslide victory. Well, as much of a landslide as you can have in an election with over a dozen parties. They're the light green on this map. This was quite a difference for us, having just moved from a city where a major election promise was to spend about half of the entire transportation services budget, over $3.6 billion, to rebuild a single 1960s elevated expressway through downtown. While the rest of the roads looked like this. Car infrastructure is horrendously expensive. But anyway, election promises are one thing. What's the reality? Did Amsterdam really remove thousands of parking spaces? Well, yes, they did. And it's pretty great. Well, mostly. I've followed urban planning issues across many cities for many years, and one of the things that's almost universal is that removing parking is contentious. After the motorific 20th century, car owners are very, very, very entitled and feel that they're owed cheap or even free parking everywhere they go. But parking generates a lot of problems too, so many cities are trying to reduce it. That's easier said than done though, and as the saying goes, when you're accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression. And boy are drivers ever privileged, even in Amsterdam. Look at a typical street like this one. In Amsterdam, only about 40% of households have a car, but you'd never know it by looking at this. Almost every street is lined with parked cars, which means that a minority of people are consuming a majority of the public space that could be used for more productive purposes. Unfortunately, street parking brings with it a lot of problems. Besides being ugly and taking up too much space, street parking can be dangerous too. A line of parked cars reduces the visibility of side streets, leading to predictable crashes, and cars coming out of parking spaces results in an increase in crashes too. And anyone cycling along a street like this is at risk of serious injury or even death if any one of these drivers opens their car door without looking. Drivers getting in and out of parking spaces also disrupt traffic, which worsens congestion on the street. On commercial streets, it's often argued that street parking is necessary for businesses, but the math doesn't really add up. There's only space for 1 or 2 cars outside of most shops, and even if these spots are turning over every 30 minutes or so, which they're not, there's no way this can bring in enough revenue to make a substantial difference to most businesses. City Beautiful made an excellent video recently where he talks, among other things, about the revenue potential of commercial street parking spaces. In most cases, replacing street parking within a city with, say, a protected bicycle lane is almost always better financially. For example, during COVID, Toronto converted many of its street parking spaces into extra restaurant seating, and a recent analysis showed those patios brought in almost 50 times as much money as the parking fees they replaced. Another problem with street parking is that it's usually far too cheap, so it gets occupied quickly. There have been studies showing that in some neighborhoods, 30 to 40% of all traffic was just drivers cruising to find cheap street parking. To deal with this, you'd ideally want to increase the cost of street parking to match demand, and San Francisco tried this with their SF Park experiment, which automatically changed the price of street parking to maintain a 60 to 80% occupancy rate. This experiment worked brilliantly and was beneficial in almost every way, but drivers complained about the uncertainty of how much it would cost to park. And that's in addition to the typical whinging about price from entitled drivers, but we already knew that would happen. So a flat rate is generally more accepted, and here in Amsterdam, street parking prices were increased across the city. For example, it now costs €7.50 per hour to park in the city center. But that doesn't really get rid of the parking spaces, it just reduces their demand. In most cities, street parking is just an accepted reality. We have come to expect that almost every street is lined with parked cars. But does it really have to be this way? Japanese cities took a very different approach. Here in Tokyo, for example, there is very limited street parking, and the maximum time is usually only 1 hour or less. Most importantly, it's forbidden to park your car on the street overnight. Japan also has a proof of parking rule. If you want to buy a car, you need to prove that you have an off-street parking space for it in order to get it licensed. This is why Japanese streets look the way they do. They can get away with much narrower streets because there's no need to accommodate car parking. On a street like this, all traffic can mix together because speeds are so slow here. This is also why so many people ride bicycles in Japan despite there being very little bicycle infrastructure. These slow, narrow streets are already safe enough for many people. But come on guys, you gotta do better on big roads like this. So removing street parking can significantly improve the look and feel of a city and makes it easier to build great urban places. Of course, whenever a proposal is made to reduce car parking, many people start listing off a long list of reasons why street parking is absolutely essential and can never be removed. But let's be honest, most of the time this is just concern trolling. The people making these arguments don't actually care about the reasons they cite, they just want to keep every possible parking space. But they know saying that out loud makes them sound like an entitled jerk. But there are legitimate reasons to park a motor vehicle sometimes, and Amsterdam has exceptions for many of these cases. For example, on a street like this, there are designated spots for loading and unloading, and despite the picture showing a truck, you can park your personal vehicle here too, for that one time of year you actually use all that space in your SUV. There are also spots for car share cars, which are great and becoming increasingly popular in Amsterdam, and I talked about that in a previous video. There are also shared cargo bikes like this one, which I like even more because so many trips that people think require a car can be done quite easily with a cargo bike. And there are some designated spots for disabled parking too, though Amsterdam also does a lot to ensure that people with physical disabilities can get around in other ways, which can increase their independent mobility. Because what most people fail to acknowledge is that a huge percentage of the disabled population can't drive. So after taking all of this into account, this is what it looks like. This shows that it is possible to cover the corner cases needed for car parking without having to line every street with ugly metal boxes. By now you may be thinking, how did Amsterdam actually pull this off? Did they just dump all the cars into a canal and call it a day? Well, no, not exactly. They've actually tested several methods in different parts of the city.
If you're sharing a hotel room with friends, you're also sharing a bathroom.
The most common method is attrition. Every street parking space requires a permit, so as people give up their parking permits, for example because they've sold their car or moved out of the city just doesn't grant a new permit. So over time, the problem just works itself out. So that frees up around 1,000 parking spaces per year, but that's not quite fast enough, so Amsterdam is trying other methods of speeding up the process. For example, Amsterdam is taking advantage of street redesigns in order to remove parking spaces. This is Koninginnenweg, a relatively busy street in Amsterdam Zuid. When this construction is completed, it will be much safer, especially for people cycling, and it will be reconstructed with around 140 fewer parking spaces. And I featured this street, Kinkerstraat, in my most dangerous places to cycle in Amsterdam video. This redesign will provide much more room for people cycling and will also remove 27 parking spaces in the process.
Okay, Dave, there's your 8:30. And
Very
you're muted.
I'm good now. I was just in the middle of texting you asking if we were getting close to it. So
Yeah.
good job. Okay. You've now had a 45-minute quick introduction to parking reform. Hopefully you found it interesting and useful. Next, I'd like to talk about what message we want to give to the council Monday evening at the parking workshop. I know most of you have not had a chance to review the staff report that Bjorn Griepenberg has written for presentation Monday night. It was only posted at 3:30 today. I went through it quickly. I think Bjorn makes some good points, but I think we're still going to hear from folks about parking meters were never going to work. We need more parking, not less. Cars are great. It's just the kind of stuff we hear. We know that. So what I would like us to do is go through a process to come up with the points that we as a group would like to make. And yes, I know having 3 council members as part of this call is a little odd. I'm fine with that. They give them maybe they don't want to participate in what comments they want to hear, but at least we'll give them some advance warning. Dan, well, hold on. 2 things. Is Ann Edminster here? I haven't seen her yet.
Yeah, I see her on the list.
I see her. We're good. Thanks, Ann. Dan, can we do breakout rooms?
We can.
We can. Can we
Yes.
randomly assign people to breakout rooms?
We can randomly assign people to breakout rooms. How many would you like?
I'm going to want 5, and I'm going to give people some instructions before they go there. Let me see, there's 33 people here, 5 breakout rooms, 6 or 7 people per room. I want you to talk among yourselves and come up with every idea you can think of that you might want to hear made Monday evening. Spend 4 or 5 minutes doing that. Then, and I probably should leave this, but I'm not sure I can just step into, no, I can step into a breakout room and give you a little more direction about 5 minutes in. For right now, Dan, divide people into 5 rooms and spend time coming up with all the things you think you might want to hear.
Okay, and you want 5 minutes on that?
Yeah, 5 minutes is good.
Okay.
Actually, no, make it 8 minutes.
8 minutes.
8
Okay.
minutes.
I will set it for 8 minutes, and if you can't bounce in between, then we'll figure out what we're doing as we go.
No, I'll tell you, I'll put something on chat at 5 minutes for what I want people to do for the last 3 minutes.
Okay. Cool.
Hey, Dave, quick
Yes, Chris.
question.
Yeah.
So can you summarize, like, does Bjorn's report make any specific recommendations that we should be aware of before we go into these breakout rooms?
Great question, Chris. The answer is no. He does, but they're fairly limited. Some changes in what spaces are 2-hour versus 4-hour. But he does things like bring up the possibility. Oh, he talks about improvements to the Keller Street garage, which I'm thrilled he made that point. I mean, obviously I can't speak as a woman, but even as a guy walking into the Keller Street garage and going up the stairs at 11 o'clock at night is uncomfortable. So he thinks if we do a better job of maintaining that, lighting it, that would be a good idea. He then brings up some ideas like better parking management, light, or I think he calls out the capacity signs in the garages. He talks about parking meters, maybe dynamically priced, but those he doesn't necessarily propose. He just mentions them as possibilities. And that's as much as I can tell you based on my one quick read. Does that help?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Very good. So, okay, divide into 5 breakout rooms. Spend 5 minutes coming up with ideas.
Dave,
Okay.
I have one more question.
Dave, did you see the data, the report from Schwartz or the T.Y. Lin now firm, the actual data from the study?
Oh, you mean the data for the study in Petaluma?
Yeah, that's what we're waiting for.
Well,
we were hired a consultant for 100. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's in the report.
Yeah, that is what will be presented to the council Monday evening.
The data,
Yes,
not just his opinion about.
right.
Okay.
There's a lot of data in the document on the city website. Yes.
Okay. I'm looking at it. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Except no data on accessibility parking.
That could be. I haven't necessarily looked for that. Bring it up Monday night.
Here we go.
Okay. Thanks, Dan.
And everybody should be in their own room. Shall we go drop into one? We probably should. So if you are still here, good. Everybody's dugging in, and Only Teddy is not paying attention, which is okay. Is there one that we should drop into? I'm wondering. I kind of don't want to get sucked into being a facilitator.
Don't go to a weak one, or, you know, and
Here we are again. Wait a minute.
Yes, now we're back at least. And the act of leaving muted everybody, and I think Dave is still in that group.
Ramon was tapping his ear. It was a good hint to me that I'd missed a step. Thank you.
Cool.
Okay, so the other groups are taking their full last 60 seconds.
Apparently, yes.
I accidentally kicked myself out of the my breakout room, so I missed.
We've all done that once upon a time.
Yeah.
Good to see you, Abigail. It's been a while.
You too. Yeah, Happy New Year.
And same to you. Hey, I love
Yeah.
that break front behind you.
Oh, thank you.
There we go.
Okay, is everyone back?
This is the first time I've done this in a long time, and I'm only seeing 5 participants up here at the top, so I'm not totally sure. I think they are.
I see 25 at the bottom. We had 33 before, but I think that might tell us that 8 people slipped away during the breakout room.
Might have lost a few.
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
Can we share the screen with Ann Edminster?
Anne can share her screen if she would like.
Yes, I hope she likes.
Go for it, Anne.
Sure, I shall. Okay, hang on a sec here. Okay. Voila.
There we go. Okay. What we are going to do here, and ignore the colors for the moment. We're going to go through each group one by one and ask them for their top priority. We're going to do that a couple of times till we get a number of priorities up on Ann's board, and then we're going to start talking about how to organize those. This is a technique I recently learned through the National Shred Institute. I recently saw Healthy Petaluma use this quite effectively. So group 1, which is where I was, Nicola, I think you became the de facto leader. What was our top priority?
No, I was just the writer down of words.
No, you became the de facto because nobody else took the job. What do you have down for number 1?
I think utilization of meter rates on Kentucky Street.
Okay. Group 2, what's your top number 1?
Who's group 2?
Who's group 2? I'll speak up because I was
Go ahead, Bruce.
in a group. Yeah, the idea of pricing and the various forms of pricing, but a more interesting idea I heard was that parking area in front of McNear's Mystic Theater, that is just kind of like, well, it's not a great parking area, and it might be a good place to do something different to create a more pedestrian, stroller friendly environment.
Those are 2 ideas. Why don't we let's break those on the two Post-its, and we'll skip Bruce next time around.
Oh, okay.
Group 3, what do you have?
Who was group 3?
I have no idea.
Well, how do we know who we are?
It would have said group 3 on the screen when you entered into it.
Oh,
yeah, group 3 is Rich and Chris and Abigail. Is that right?
Okay.
Yep. So we didn't come up with actually much of anything. We were lamenting the lack of data, so that it was kind of hard for us to come up. We did discuss, I think the hope for a holistic sort of approach to the issue. But did I miss anything, you guys? We were more lamenting.
Okay. No, I think one data can be a good answer. When I look at the number of amount of field time spent in this, it wasn't as much as I would have hoped. And a holistic approach is probably another place we want to split things into. Anne, if you could. holistic approach is different than want data.
Right.
Can I make one comment on the first item there, utilization of meter rates on Kentucky? It really is utilization of parking on Kentucky.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah,
Just
just we don't, the data didn't tell us, this is what prompts us is we want more data. The data didn't tell us what the parking utilization rates on Kentucky were.
I think what you're saying is priced parking, not paid parking on Kentucky.
No, we don't have
No?
parking on Kentucky, so we just need to
No.
look at what the parking utilization rates are. We didn't have.
Oh, I see. Oh,
Yeah.
so
Oh,
this is
okay.
this is a data request.
Yeah,
Okay.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, I actually did offer to the city before they did the traffic study that if they needed bodies to go do counts different times of the day, I would ask urban chat folks to help out, and they didn't take me up on it. So whatever.
They didn't take me up on my offer either.
Yeah. Group four, what do you have?
Okay, who's group 4?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Bill and Kimberly, I think that was us.
The idea that got the most discussion was making the existing parking structures safer and more pleasant to be in, especially at night.
Got my stickies messed up here. Okay.
That's a great one, Bill. Thank you. And group 5, what was your top priority?
We talked about wanting more data, and I talked about when 30 years ago when we did the Central Petaluma specific plan, we did a deep dive into parking and identified it as a major issue, and that it would just keep becoming, and so here we are today, and in 20 years it will be even worse. But we also talked about how people are going to scream, and that the city needs to work with downtown merchants in such a way that they are gradually educated in how this could work for them, because the merchants downtown are going to perceive it as a loss of business and a difficulty for their customers, and business is already difficult. So just a real effort in slowly educating. You can't just educate in one workshop. Somehow there has to be a gradual education, or maybe just a gradual introduction. I don't know.
No, I think that's a great thought. There will be screaming. I like that.
There'll be screaming.
Yeah. That was group 5. So let's go back to the top. Let's get a few more Post-its up there. Nickel, what was number 2 on your list?
No additional parking downtown.
You say no additional parking downtown?
No
Okay.
additional parking downtown.
Okay.
All right, they've changed some features in Miro since I've used it. It's like, hey, I didn't ask for that. Okay.
You got it?
I will, don't worry.
Yeah. And group 2 did give us 2 comments last time. On the other hand, I just saw Sue post something in chat that would become their 3rd comment, and it was one I think does deserve to be heard. So let me pick up what she said. Well, she talks about having Stockholm and Mi Pueblo talk about how the parakeets improve their revenues. Yes, okay, she got it out also. She meant parklets, not parakeets. That's one of the best typos of the day.
Sorry about that.
Yay, autocorrect.
Without parakeets.
It autocorrects to parakeets. It's very funny.
I love that.
No, wait, what was the sentence?
The sentence is get Stockholm and Mi Pueblo to talk about how parklets improve their revenues.
But it was how parakeets improve their revenues.
Yeah.
Parakeets would help.
Damn you, autocorrect.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think parakeets would help, but I don't think they're going to budge on it.
Oh, geez.
Oh. Very
okay. Group 3, what do you have? What's your
So
next one?
the one thing I forgot to mention, we also came to the most immediate conclusion that parking is not the problem, cars are the problem. But to really highlight that.
Okay.
If I can chime in here, I think that's where we have to put bikes somewhere on here, because we got to give people options. And at the same time of giving options, we got to be empathetic for people who cannot ride bikes.
Yeah.
That was
That
next on
has
my
to
list.
always be in the same sentences, something like, I am able, but I know others can't, you know, but for those who can. But I think we really need to put bikes in here somewhere near the tippy top.
And I like using the term rollers now. You got bikers, walkers, and rollers kind
Thank
of
you.
everybody else.
You know how I feel about that, Bruce. I appreciate it.
Okay. Group 4, got anything else to offer?
Well, I think our group also was very much in favor of a holistic solution.
Okay. Let's get it down. There's another one that's just...
Yeah, and can I say, we talked also about not only about really selling this to merchants, but selling it to drivers. The idea that if you want to be sure there's going to be a parking space on every block, this is how to get it.
So education. I don't know how you educate the public on anything these days, but I agree it's appropriate. So good comment.
Couple of things. I think we need to define what holistic approach means. I don't really know what that means, and I'm sitting here at this meeting. And then the other thing is we're going to get, it's true that the restaurants have reaped great benefits from having those parklets, but I do know I've had conversations with other merchants who say that those parklets have hurt them. So I think we need to be really ready for that. There's going to be some real kicking and screaming from those merchants if we point to just restaurants.
Yeah.
I think the revenue generation idea that came out in those videos would be an important point to make, because, and it's not just for the merchants who are on that block, but it's for the whole community, because it really improves our downtown core. And I think that's a huge selling point.
Yeah, I second that. I think focusing on the revenue benefits is really important. I know you guys might have seen it, but Strong Towns did a video sort of comparing the use of like a block that has sort of restricted parking or no parking is more walkable and pedestrian friendly versus a block that is like more car friendly, and just like the sheer difference in numbers between the revenue that you can generate on a people friendly space versus a car friendly space is astounding. And there's definitely numbers out there to support that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take one last pass through for maybe thoughts that people don't feel are up there yet. Nicola, got anything from group 1?
Yeah, we had a comment that the overlay, if it's housing or anything else, should require parking within the structure itself. Basically, basement, first floor, somewhere. Instead of adding more need for parking, add their own parking.
Okay. Group 2, any last comments?
Dave, can you talk a little bit about that last one? Are we negating ourselves with that comment?
Are we what?
Negating ourselves here. That seems like counterintuitive to everything else we're saying here.
I think there was one person who expressed that opinion, and that wasn't necessarily widely held, but it certainly was an opinion that was expressed.
Yeah. John brought it up earlier.
Yeah.
For anything over 4 stories. If it's going over 4 stories, is what I was trying to imply. Anything at 4 stories less, no parking is needed. 4 stories less, but if you're going over 4 stories for that many apartments, that many people, then you really need to be thinking about doing that. And then that may be market rate rather than affordable.
And that's a different argument then, right?
Yeah.
Very different than what I understood from the meeting, but I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah.
I would like to just add one thing, that to putting all of this discussion in the context of the climate emergency, climate crisis, what happened in Los Angeles, what's happening everywhere else, what's happening in the White House now, and how important it's going to be for us to do things differently in our town if we're going to have not just a better world, but a better town. And it might require us to question some of the things that we thought were true, like everybody should have a parking space for wherever they want to go.
So I wonder if the question about the overlay, since it wasn't a universally held opinion, I wonder if that should be folded into that development of that holistic parking management plan, so that there are clear clear markers for when we need parking and we don't need parking, rather than reject the opportunity for housing downtown because we require parking. So I just suggest that we open that up a little bit, how we're thinking about that.
To respond to John's comment, and I didn't really want to get into sort of arguing back and forth on comments, but I think what a parking reform person would say is, developers, you are not allowed to have anybody who lives in your structure park on the street. You can't park at Petaluma Market. You can't park in the Keller Street garage overnight. You can't park on the street. You put in the parking you need to sell your units, and that's all the parking you have. And if a developer comes along saying, hey, I'm going to make my project for 70-year-olds and up who no longer drive, cool. I want to live there. So I don't think a flat, you have to provide parking is going to create the range of housing we want. And we shut down the imagination of people who we want to be imaginative.
Yeah, I like that better.
Sorry, John, didn't mean to step on your toes, but every once in a while you have to do that to council people. McDonald will tell you that.
I was pushing him around earlier today.
Who, Kevin or John, or both?
John.
Okay. Okay.
And I think
now,
one additional comment was that I don't know if this is exactly the right place to bring it up at the council meeting, but somehow educating the public that the roads do not belong to cars solely. People think that they do because I saw there was, and I was going to write a letter to the editor and I didn't. Somebody wrote in about, cars are paying all the taxes for roads and therefore blah, blah, blah. Well, it's not true. People think that. And so they need to be educated. It's not true. I mean, I drive cars, so whatever, but, people need to understand we're all paying for roads through taxes. So everybody has a right to those roads, including the bicyclists who, quote unquote, never pay taxes for the roads. Yes, they do. We all pay taxes for the roads, and the main beneficiaries are the cars driving on the roads and parking on the roads. So somehow getting that message out, I think, is critical.
Okay. No, I think that's all great stuff. Now I want to target how we focus on Monday night. What I want folks to do, and I'm going to ask you to raise your hands here just so we deal with things in order. Anybody who sees two of these Post-its that belong together, raise your hand and offer your thoughts. I want to eventually cluster these into 3, 4, 5 groups and work from there.
There's a number of them have to do with outreach to the merchants, outreach to people, outreach to the bicyclists, outreach to rollers, that sort of stuff, that outreach part.
Nicola, one, let's start raising our hands, and 2, point to the 2 Post-its you think belong in the same group. Just tell us which ones they are. I think Anne has the only ability to move things.
Right. I think that she's put these 2 together already. Educate the public and sell to the merchants. I mean, those are things that have to happen. Oh, we've got 3 of them now.
Okay. Who else has things they want to combine? I don't see any hands right now. Maybe that's something in the way I've got things set up here. Come on, folks. If I don't see some hands, I'm going to make decisions myself. And I know I make perfect decisions, so it doesn't bother me, but.
Hey, everybody, it's Jane, and I have
Hey,
to
Jane.
cut out right now. And I'm not going to be at the meeting on Monday, so I won't be giving any input, but thanks for having this, and I really appreciated the whole discussion.
Hey, thanks for being here, Jane.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody else got ideas on combining?
Well, there's a couple of them that have to do with getting data together, getting information.
Okay.
Cars not parking on the problem, climate crisis. Yeah, I think maybe just those, the next one to it too. If you get more what's happening in that parking area. Structure.
Tell Ann which one you're talking about, Nicola.
I think the one she's just moving is also
Okay.
could be data. What is happening to that area, to the things that are in front of McNair, and also what is happening to the restaurants. The change that happened to the restaurants, Stockholm and Mi Pueblo, are data.
Yeah, I actually disagree about the one at McNear's.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an actual proposal. It's not, in my view, it's not a data request.
That's a parking removal proposal.
Yeah.
But Bruce is being bold with that one.
Yeah, I think that's a standalone. And I think the one about the restaurants is really about, I think there's several that are about meters and pricing of meters and how it relates to pricing in parking lots. And then what the revenue generated through the meters, how that would be used and how that would be a selling point. So the one about the restaurants, I think is about revenue.
Well, it's a question, so it's a data, in my view.
Well, I think when we talked about it in the group, it was about getting those folks to come to the city council meeting and to talk about how it was beneficial for them to use the street for something other than parking. So it wasn't really a request. It was more of a how to get public opinion behind this.
Well, that's interesting. So we could actually put it in two categories. I mean, because information can be used for selling, but so I'm just replicating it over here. If that's okay.
Okay, that's fine.
Then, as far as like the holistic approach, I think the rollers are key part of the solution. That would kind of go under holistic. Cars not parking are the problem. I can't read the other one. The print is too small for my aged eyes.
Didn't we also have a comment from Lisa Marie about the importance of bikes? I think maybe it got lost in the hubbub.
That's the rollers.
I thought those are two different comments. Okay, that's fine. I see what you did, Ann. That's great.
Can I
brought up, Dave, was providing some kind of local shuttle so we reduce the need for cars and thereby reduce the need for parking. If we had a free accessible shuttle that brought people in from the neighborhoods into downtown where you can walk everywhere, I think that is a solution that should be included.
Cool. Dave?
I personally love that idea, living on the east side. I brought it up, so yeah.
Yeah, what Chris said.
But nobody else heard until now.
I feel the same way. We live in Southeast Petaluma, and Luma Go doesn't come here, and we're far, far away. So we pretty much have to drive to downtown. I mean, if we lived a quarter of a mile or half a mile from downtown, we could walk, but it's a long walk at night.
But wouldn't it be cool if you could go to like I live off Sonoma Mountain Parkway. If I could drive to Leghorn and park my car at Leghorn, and I knew there was going to be a shuttle there at 7 o'clock, I could hop on the shuttle and get downtown. So yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
I'll just make the standard Safe Streets Petaluma pitch for, we need a complete network of all ages and abilities, you know, bike, roller, routes all around town. So how do people get downtown? If the only way you're going to get to downtown is go on East Washington, you know, you're going to want to take a car unless you're nuts. But if you have an alternate route, whether it's Lynch Creek and Lynch Creek needs better security and better lighting, or whether it's going to be any one of a number of crosstown connectors, those are important. And until you have that complete network, then people are going to find a gap that's going to keep them from getting out of their car and finding another way.
Yeah.
So is part of this going to be like, I'm assuming whatever's going to happen would happen in phases. So would this be like, would we go, okay, like what are we recommending as phase one? Or when you read Bjorn's report, Dave, did he talk about phases, or was it just the whole Megillah?
It was the whole Megillah, and I think that's intentional. I don't think it's a workshop. This is really a place to get feedback from the council of where they want to go. I think Bjorn would have been stepping beyond his authority to try to make that decision for them.
Got it. Okay.
So there is, look, I'm sorry, I have my hand raised, but I think it's not visible in the background on my computer.
Oh, I see it now.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway,
you're too white. I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly. The presentation does call out desired outcomes for a parking management system. And I think we really need to speak in that context, because those are the objectives of our work, right? I mean, what do we want to get to? We need to be talking in terms of the desired outcomes. Let's see, let me pull this up again so I can speak to it. So the desired outcomes, this is page 7 of the presentation for Monday: ease downtown congestion and pain points around parking, loading, deliveries, etc., optimize curb space for various uses. And this is all very broad. Help guide investments in downtown parking and mobility options, inform future development requirements. That speaks to John's point. Review and, if needed, update parking fees and regulations. Identify actions needed to comply with state and regional policies. And then the big bolded one is create a vibrant and safe downtown that is accommodating to residents, visitors, employees, and businesses. So I think we just really need to focus our feedback on how do we achieve these desired outcomes with the the feedback we're offering.
Hello, I don't know. Hello?
Yeah, actually, I just realized there's some hands I couldn't see previously. I think Leslie, your hand might have been up longest, followed by Mary Davies. I'm sorry, I missed it.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a point on the educating folks about the alternatives that are available to them. I know there was a town, and I can look it up to find out what the name of the town was, but they essentially made signs to tell people how far of a walk or a bike ride it was between one destination or another, to just kind of, help people see, like, oh, it's actually not that far if I just, I can just hop on my bike from here and I can go downtown, or I can walk here, and to just remind them that they don't have to necessarily take their cars. And there's actually through that, there's a place now where you can essentially send them what you want the signs to say, and then they will print out those signs. So that's something that came to mind as far as informing people.
Basically, wayfinding to educate people that they don't need to drive.
Yeah.
I think it was Raleigh, North Carolina did a very aggressive job with that. That may be the one you're thinking of.
Yeah, that might be it.
Okay. And then Mary Davies. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I was just going to refer to Leslie's idea on that, and to say, that is part of what Bruce is talking about too, that wayfinding. We've got a lot of great paths that people cannot find in our town, or maybe they can find them, but unless they can see those signs that say Lynch Creek Trail, 10 minutes to the library, they're not going to be using them as they could.
I think it's a great comment. Thank you. Lisa Marie.
I apologize for not using the hand raised because I'm not on my own computer. Oh,
Actually, your hand was up. It's still up.
I don't know how that happened on this computer. I think that the signage should be downtown so that people who aren't already on bikes and walking and maybe already may be prone, you're downtown and you see a sign that says, 5-minute walk to Lynch Creek Trail or whatever it might be, or but maybe that, I think downtown is the place to have where we haven't done that, and I think that's the place that if you got there by car, there's another way you could do this.
May I speak?
I
Hello?
don't know who said that. Oh,
that's Kimberly.
Kimberly,
Please get a word in for a while.
Jump in.
I cannot find my raise hand, so I'm doing a couple of thoughts. I'm a little concerned that we're all speaking as residents of Petaluma. I'm not hearing anything about all the other people who come here, and there are lots. So I'm going to refer back to my first comment, which was, I mean, this will have to happen in phases for sure. It's going to happen over time, but I think to have alternatives in place as a first step, and I said, make the parking structure friendly, something you really want to use. But also in hearing other folk, the idea of the tram, or, they have them in lots of little towns. They're the shapes of bumblebees or whatever. I'm sure ours would be a cow, but actually there is a cow one in Vermont. But my thought is to have a parking area, whether it's flat or a structure that meets with the tram for our out-of-town people. I mean, if you don't have parking in town, which I'm fine with, you have to have alternatives, and I think they have to be there first, and people be used to using them before you start laying out either the money parking or the no parking. So, yeah.
That's a good comment. I agree. And money's tough, I'm hearing somebody else's voice there. Maybe not.
I've got my hand up again.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I can see it now, but
I know it's not very easy to see. And Kimberly, it's very confusing where to find it. It's under that React button. If you click on that, it'll give you the option to raise your hand. The React at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Anyway, I couldn't find it either. So I wasn't very clear in my comment earlier, and so I'll just try to make it a little clearer now. The focus of the workshop is to ensure that we have a vibrant downtown and that we remove some of the pain points. So we've given a lot of ideas about how to structure parking or wayfinding, a variety of things that don't necessarily have to do directly with downtown. So I think we should really focus our feedback on specific ways that we think we can improve the function of downtown through better parking management. I'm probably not even being any more clear than I was the first time.
No.
But I just feel like you have to know what problem you're trying to solve, right? And I think they've given us a really clear, the presentation is very clear on what problem we're trying to solve. So let's solve that problem. And anyway, I'll stop now. Not my night.
Hey, these are tough concepts.
Well, clarification on this meeting and the process for this group and people that were in this group. And this, what is it, next one? No, this coming Monday's council meeting.
Monday, yeah.
Are we going to be organizing, you're going to bring this point up and you're going to bring this point up and you're going to bring this point up, or is it going to be kind of like ad hoc, or is Petaluma and Urban Chat going to have a spokesperson that's going to come in and represent your members, or what?
What we are going to do, what my plan is This is something we did when we argued successfully for the Petaluma Boulevard South Road Diet. We asked who was going to be there, and I'm about to ask that question next, and then asked everybody who was going to be there and represent Urban Chat in some way. Feel free to mention it. We'll pick 2 of these points that they make sure they add to their comments. They can say other things if they wish, but at least bring up 2 of the things that are said here. What we found when we did it regarding the road diet is that repetitiveness wore whatever resistance was on the council down. We watched the shoulders finally sag on the leading opponent of the road diet when he just realized he'd been overwhelmed, and we've been trying ever since to replicate that. So what I am going to do is I'm going to take what's here in front of me, and Ann, I don't know if you have a way to print out where we are now and get that to me. I'm going to write a simple, just a few words defining what each of these boxes are about. And then I'll mail it to everybody who expects to be at the council meeting on Monday and comment, asking them which 2 they're going to include in their comments. So I'm not going to try to button this all tonight. I think we've been going long enough. I'm getting tired. But can I get raised hands to the extent you can find them? And if not, just wave your hand at me. Who is going to be there Monday night and would like to make comments tied to what we've done this evening? I see Mary Davies. I see Leslie. And Leslie, why don't you give me a last name so I can track you down?
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat, but it's Frouchet.
Yeah, put it in the chat.
Yeah.
I can sort of guess, but yeah, I'm probably going to get it wrong. Bruce Hagan, thank you. Sue Schilt, thank you. Nicola Fry, got it. Sharon Kirk, got it. Those are all the hands I see. Am I missing somebody?
So I am oddly, as the host, unable to find the raise hand button as well.
Just put your hand up physically.
But I am texting to make sure that I have space for space in my calendar on Monday. Now.
Very good.
Okay, so Dave. So Keith can't make it to the council meeting, but he would like to comment. Can he do a comment remotely? How do we do that?
No, unfortunately, remote commenting is currently shut down by the council because of Zoom bombing. But he can write comments and submit them to the city clerk. They become part of the record and are distributed to the council.
Okay, perfect. So he'll do that. So if he can, add him to the list of whatever.
I'll probably do something in writing rather than come to the meeting, Dave. So
okay. Chris got that, and I'll make a note that. And I spelled Rebelo wrong. You'd think after all these years I could be better than that,
well,
but
hey.
Okay. And for those of you, this is probably more directed toward Keith and Sue, who have not submitted comments previously, if you go to the city meeting page and open up the agenda by clicking on the HTML packet link, you'll get directions on how to submit those comments, what the email address is for the city clerk, et cetera. So
got it.
Appreciate that.
Is there a deadline on time? Like, does it have to be noon that day or something? Or
I think it's sometime in the afternoon, but I encourage doing it before that, because if it gets too close to the council meeting, the council members don't see it, that they get busy. So I'd really target sometime in the morning.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
And Sharon, you made a note about the interface changed. You're muted, Sharon.
I was just trying to tell everybody how to raise their hand for future reference.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I've sent a screenshot. It's
okay.
It's just very confusing.
Also, I'll put in the good thing about submitting your comment earlier is that everybody who might be coming to that meeting can read the comments as well. So it's not even just for people on the council, it's for a larger audience.
Yep.
So yeah.
Now, a great comment. The folks I have now, myself, Mary Davies, Leslie Frouchet, Bruce Hagan, Sue Schilt, Nicola Fry, Sharon Kirk, Dan Like, all of those people in person, Keith Schilt and Chris Rebelo will submit comments. Did I miss anybody? Okay.
So question though, so it just occurred to me when Chris said that it will be part of the package that people see. Is there a benefit to us both writing in advance and showing up, or is that negated?
I do that a lot.
Yeah,
It works.
there's no rules against it. It can be very appropriate, especially if you have different comments to make, so they become complementary. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Good. Okay.
I just also the other thing about doing both is that if there's a ton of people, they're going to limit speaker time. So you can get up and say, you know, I urge you to read my written comment. You can write as much as you want to on your written comment. And then, you know, you hit your high points when you're actually making your public comment. And that's probably the best way to go. So, yeah.
That's a really good comment about the fact they may restrict the amount of time. Although I think generally they restrict time for general public comments at the beginning of the meeting. They don't restrict in the agenda itself. But what I recommend to folks is plan on speaking for 2 minutes at normal speaking speed, which I try to get down to. That's probably something close to 200 words. Anything beyond that, you might risk getting cut off. And to be honest, I find 200 words is about the point where people tune out anyway. Say your point, get it said, and move on.
So Dave, you're gonna send like the note cards to us. I mean the great.
I will send the 6, 7, whatever it was we ended up with on Ann's document and ask you to take whichever 2 you want. And take is the wrong word. Say you will comment on those 2, and there will be multiple people tackling each one of those. But just make sure we get 2 of those points in there.
Okay.
Okay. Folks, this has been an experiment in finding ways to advocate effectively. There's things that I've done differently, but I think it worked awfully well. I am thrilled you were all here, and hopefully we make a difference, and hopefully we find other times to use this approach to advocacy.
Also, Dave, just let me say one final thing. I think all of us should be perhaps prepared for the onslaught that will come on Nextdoor, and that for those of us who are willing to touch into that thing that can sometimes be a cesspool, it will be very helpful to have these talking points to refer back to make measured responses to some of what will come up on and honestly, I think you and I have talked about this. I think it might be a good idea at some point to do a social media training so that people here really can kind of get a sense of the best way to engage on that platform.
I for folks who maybe don't go on Nextdoor very often, congratulations. But folks like Eric Leland, Chris have done a marvelous job of not getting down in the mud, but just making calm, rational comments. Yes, they often get shouted down, eventually ignored, but those of us who are in this fray believe that there are people standing on the sidelines who are learning from those calm comments, and the people who can't resist mud throwing gradually lose credibility. So
well, also it just shows that there are more viewpoints in town. There's not, hi, we don't agree, and here's why, in a very, very friendly voice.
Yep.
And if somebody, I can't stomach it much, but I get into it. So there you go.
Okay. those of you who still hung on till the end, thank you very much. It has been an enjoyable evening and enjoy
Thanks,
the rest
Dave.
of it. Hey, you're welcome. Happy to do it.
Good job.
Thank you, Dave.
Bye-bye.
Talk
See
to
you guys
soon.
around.
See you, Bruce.
Bye.